Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of Living on Rocky Top. My name is Karsten Hoglund, a freshman studying broadcast journalism.
And my name is Rosa, and I'm a sophomore studying broadcast journalism.
Living on Rocky Top is the latest podcast from the Daily Beacon.
Here we will dive into what it is like to be a volunteer and live the Rocky Top lifestyle.
Our first guest on the show is Ziven Noorani from the Tickle College of Engineering.
He's here to talk about the influx of admissions we've had in recent years and why the School of Engineering is such a popular choice for students here at UT.
Without further ado, here is Ziven.
Hello, I'm Ziven Noorani. Most people just call me Z. I'm a senior at the Tickle College of Engineering Biomedical Engineering Department.
Awesome.
That's cool. So how'd you get into engineering as a major?
Actually, really funny story. Kind of depressing story. My mom got diagnosed with cancer when I was in high school.
I'm sorry.
She's fine now. It's
Okay.
all good. But that was sort of the way I got into the whole studying things about the medical field. I ended up going down this long Wikipedia rabbit hole about cancer and cancer treatments because that's what any normal teenager does when they're dealing with potentially traumatic information. And that sort of put me down the engineering rabbit hole with things like regenerative medicine, drug system design, and things like that.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Yeah, that's a different story than
Yeah,
most,
I
for
was not
sure.
expecting
Yeah.
that. So why did you choose UT?
Partially because of the money. I'm an in-state student, and UT gave me the best financial aid package.
Okay.
Also because I'd spent my entire life in West Tennessee,
Mhm.
which doesn't have mountains, and I really like mountains. So that was part of the reason I came out here.
It's great.
So it's close enough to home that I can drive back whenever
Mhm.
I want, but also far enough that I don't have to deal with my parents breathing down my neck all the
Yeah,
time.
for sure.
So, what do you hope to achieve in the future with engineering?
Yeah, so right now I actually recently got accepted to the master's program here.
Okay, congratulations.
So I'll be here for another, thank you. I'll be here for another 2 to 3 years, depending on how long that takes. And I'm still working on figuring out what exactly, but I really want to do regenerative medicine.
Okay.
Specifically with a focus on prosthetic and orthotic tissue integration,
Mhm.
things like that.
Could you explain more about that?
Yeah, so regenerative medicine itself exists in a variety of different sub-disciplines and whatnot, but my specific interest is looking at how can we enable organic tissue to more easily integrate with hip implants and bone implants and things like that without causing a negative immune response.
Oh, wow.
So kind of making the tissue grow around and conform to the implant.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. So, how would you say, what grade did you say you were?
I'm a senior, so I'm
Senior.
graduating in May.
So, talk about coming to University of Tennessee from when you started to now.
Yeah, so I had a couple of friends who were a year above me, so they graduated when I was still in my junior year of high school. And they came out here, and they were telling me, hey, you've got to come down here. It's a ton of fun. There's, something for everyone. And because I didn't really have any friends up until then who had gone to, college, because most of my friends were within my age group, my, only real understanding of college was you have, two options where it's, you either study or you party with frats all day.
Right?
Which is still kind of the case depending on
Yeah.
who you
Or
are,
both.
Right.
depending on what school you go to. But so I came up here. I visited. I want to say my Christmas break of my junior year of high school. So my dad and I and my mom also came up here. We toured the campus and found out that there were a lot of really cool things. I was, of course, by this point pretty dialed in on I want to do engineering. I just haven't figured out what exactly. So we toured the Tickle College of Engineering. We got to see all of their facilities. And I spoke to my mom and dad and I was like, hey, I really want to go here. And with the financial aid package, I'm essentially being paid to go here.
Mhm.
So I ended up enrolling in the Ignite program,
Okay.
which is, for those people who don't know, is this summer engagement program for, I believe, incoming freshmen. And the specific Ignite program that I did was Ignite Serves, which is a lot of community service. So it wasn't just focusing on familiarizing yourself with campus, but also familiarizing yourself with the community at large. And that's sort of how I ended up here.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Since you're graduating, where's 3 takeaways that you can give to future students?
Yeah, I would say depending on, of course, what you're doing, there's a couple of different options. If you're going into any of the sciences and engineering especially, I would highly recommend undergraduate research. Especially in the Tickle College of Engineering, you'll have a lot of professors within your department and outside of your specific department that are really good for like mentoring, and of course they also have a really bunch of really cool projects that you can research on, and depending on how you go about the research, you can also get paid for it and turn it into a part-time job, which is actually what I'm doing right now. I'm doing research on cancer biology, which is a lot of fun.
How's that going?
It's aside from having to analyze multiple terabytes of data on a pretty regular basis, just like sitting in front of a computer,
Yeah.
it is a lot of fun because I get to work with organic tissue samples. I get to work with like really cool imaging technology. It's just the data analysis part that I really don't like.
Yeah.
Aside from getting involved via undergraduate research, if you have the option, of course, look into things like Ignite. The other thing is, and I realize that this entire list is kind of directed towards freshmen, if you have the opportunity, I would highly recommend looking into a living and learning community. Most of the colleges on campus have some sort of living learning community, which is basically where you get a bunch of freshmen into one particular dorm, and certain sections of that dorm will be reserved for freshmen within that major. And it's a great way to like befriend people who you're going to be working alongside throughout your 4 years at UT. And it's also a great way to have a support system, especially for some of your harder classes.
For sure.
Yeah.
I bet you guys create like good study groups and
Yes. Actually, I'm still very close with a very large amount of the people who I lived with freshman year.
yeah, that's awesome.
One of them specifically I'm really close with. He got me into playing like Dungeons and Dragons and stuff, which yes is a nerd game, I know, but it's so much fun. But yeah, LLCs are a really good option. Looking into like, of course there's a bunch of clubs on campus, both for like professional development, things that you're just more interested in for like having fun. Like my friend's older brother, and I never actually went to any of his meetings. I feel really bad about this. My friend's older brother actually ran a tea appreciation club my freshman year, where they would just like get like different kinds of tea leaves from all over the world, and then once a week they would just like get into a classroom, take a kettle, and just brew a bunch of different teas, which was really, an interesting thing if that's what you're into. Also, and I realize this is not just 3 things, but
No, you're good.
I'm not a sports person, but I highly recommend going to the football games.
yes.
Oh yeah.
Even if you don't like sports, the atmosphere is just insane.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. That was probably the highlight of my freshman year.
I actually waited until this past season to go to a football game.
Oh really?
And I feel kind of like I wasted 3 years not doing it. But yeah, I got tickets to the Bama game, the one where they like took down the goalposts.
That was worth it though.
Yeah.
It was so much fun.
Mhm.
Yeah. I wasn't able to get tickets, so I was just at my friend's apartment. But the TV was behind, but she lives at Valhall.
Mhm.
So like we saw the fireworks go up, and then the TV eventually caught up. We were like, I just spoiled, but it's fine.
But yeah, I think as far as like advice to the other thing, you're going to be tempted to have a lot of like partying and stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Don't do it. It will screw you over. There's going to come a day where you realize you've been hungover for 3 straight days in a row, haven't gone to a single class, and you're all of a sudden going to be like 3 weeks behind schedule because you've just completely forgotten everything you've done. So
Yeah.
if you want to party, just like do it in moderation.
Yeah, I think there's a healthy balance. Like there's the weekends, and if you're gonna do it on a weekday, just make sure you don't have an 8 a.m. day.
Yeah.
I do have friends who actually pre-gamed for their 8 a.m.s, which
No
I do
way.
not recommend
Oh my
at all.
gosh.
They were miserable, but they thought it was fun.
Oh
So
my gosh. Especially in your major.
yeah, no.
Like we're
It-
sorry.
go
No,
on.
you can
No.
talk. I was gonna say we're journalism students, so
Mhm.
I don't want to say it's like easier than
Right.
It's different.
But
It's
like,
easier in a different way.
to
Yeah.
us, it's easier. in a way,
Exactly.
Yeah.
But like compared to
Yeah, I
Your
mean,
major,
my
I-
8
oh
a.m.s,
my
my
God, that'd
freshman
be
year were all
awful.
physics and calculus classes.
Mhm.
oh gosh.
And it's almost impossible to do like derivatives and integrals when you're seeing triple.
Yeah.
Which I haven't personally done because I'm a responsible young man.
Uh-huh.
But I have friends who showed up to their calculus 8 a.m.s either still hungover or just stoned out of their boards. Do not recommend. It's not a fun time.
My goodness. So you touched on engineering. How would you say the College of Engineering differentiates from other schools around maybe the East Coast or even the U.S.? What draws people to UT?
So with UT, I'm trying to think, because the only real frame of reference I have is for University of Memphis, which was, 25 minutes away from my house growing up, which I did almost end up going to, but entirely too close to home. The big difference, specifically in the biomedical department, was that UT tends to be more focused on like biomechanics and medical device design, whereas University of Memphis was more in tune with things like tissue engineering and stuff, which I think they actually had an undergraduate focus in tissue engineering, which was really cool. In terms of just like broader differences, I'm not super familiar with how University of Memphis handles it. UT's engineering program is chock full of opportunities for like study abroads, internships, professional development. We have in the student union, we have like that Center for Career Development and stuff. The engineering department has its own engineering specific version of that, which is the engineering professional practice. And that gets you in touch with like collaborations with Oak Ridge, local startups, things like that. I've got a buddy actually who's in the nuclear engineering department. He did a lot of stuff with Oak Ridge, and now he works part-time as a facilities manager for the College of Nuclear Engineering, which is really cool.
That's very cool.
Yes.
So you mentioned something about study abroad programs for engineering.
Yes.
Do you care to touch on
there
that a
are
little bit?
I don't know the specifics of them,
Okay.
but I do know that there are two. One, I think both of them are summer study abroad programs. One of them takes you to the UK for I think 4 to 6 weeks.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then the other one takes you to somewhere in Italy. I'm trying to remember. The UK one is centered or like based in London.
Okay.
I want to say the Italy one is it's either Florence or Naples, because I don't think it's Rome. But
both beautiful places.
yes,
Yeah.
I wouldn't know. I've never been. I actually wanted to do the UK one, but
Yeah.
I was going to do it when COVID hit, which
Oh, yeah.
that's another thing. COVID really screwed everyone over. But
Yes.
the UK one I know covers 2 specific classes, one of which is required for biomedical engineering, but the other one is a departmental elective.
Okay.
So the following semester, I actually ended up taking one of those classes just here at UT, so I wasn't able to do the UK one. But yes, if you do get the opportunity to do study abroad, I love England, so I would recommend the UK. But Italy is also beautiful in its own way.
Yeah, no, I agree. I got stuck in London this past summer because we were going to Italy and it was like a transfer flight.
Mhm.
And it was when they were going on strike for flights.
Oh,
in Germany.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we stayed like a week in London and it was so much fun. And it's just so different there.
Yes, it's the culture shock is insane.
For
I have
sure.
a former coworker and very good friend of mine went on the UK trip, and he would send me photos and stuff, and it was just crazy. Like, because on the surface you think, okay, well, these are just like American people with funny accents, but the culture is completely different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Which I think is just gorgeous, and I really want to go back to the UK at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
That's awesome.
So you mentioned your buddy had a job that he got from UT.
Yes. So that was, I believe, through the engineering professional practice, which also collaborates with a bunch of businesses, both like big companies and local startups,
Yeah.
for the engineering expo, which we have twice a year.
Okay.
So that's like a big job fair thing specific for engineering majors.
Oh, wow.
So you can get like jobs if you're like getting ready to go into industry. You can also get internships, which a lot of them I believe are paid internships. I haven't gone through that route because I went the undergraduate research route, but one of my friends got a job at Oak Ridge doing that. And another friend of mine, she's actually getting married this year. Her fiance works at Oak Ridge through that program.
Okay.
So he did an internship with Oak Ridge as an undergrad, and then once he got his degree, they were like, "Hey, we want you to come back," and now he makes really good money. working at Oak Ridge.
I would say so. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Definitely those paid internship opportunities are
Yes.
great. It's 2023. We need to be paid for our work. So
Yes.
definitely great opportunities. So you mentioned at the expo, like what companies are there?
There were a bunch. I think AstraZeneca came one year. Part of the reason I didn't go to the expos is because the BME representation was lacking,
Okay.
unfortunately. It seems to be more focused on like electrical, comp sci, and then mechanical aerospace stuff.
Mhm.
But there are a couple of BME companies. There's this one startup out in Fountain City whose name I cannot remember, but it was started by like alumni of UT, and they
Okay.
do like particle like lipid nanoparticle stuff
Okay.
for like drug delivery.
Mhm.
AstraZeneca was out there once. I believe Johnson & Johnson comes pretty regularly.
Okay.
Of course, Oak Ridge is there
Mhm.
usually because Oak Ridge has a bunch of like outreach programs with the college. There's a lot of companies, and I cannot remember them all off the top of my head. But like they were like, you know, combined with all the students who were coming to the expo as well as all the companies that had set up.
Mhm.
I can't remember if it was in Neyland or Thompson Bowling, but there was one year that I was here where it was literally like shoulder to shoulder inside one
Oh,
of the
wow.
things. And I think this year they moved it over to the student union, so I'd imagine they'd probably scaled it down a little
Mhm.
bit. But
Yeah.
no, you get a bunch of companies. It's a really good networking opportunity. But yeah. And of course, with engineering professional practice isn't the only networking opportunity you have as an engineering major. I think this is something you see with other colleges as well, but every now and then you'll have like this sort of colloquium or a seminar that they have a bunch of guest speakers at. Some of them are grad students, some of them are postdocs, some of them are actual faculty at UT,
Mhm.
or faculty who are alumni of UT that work at other schools. So there's a lot of great ways to meet people through that as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned the word networking.
Yes.
That is huge coming in. I mean, it's huge all throughout your
Yeah.
life, but especially coming in as a freshman
Mm.
and building those relationships up to your senior year and having those relationships when you need to get a job.
Yeah, for sure.
Very, definitely big. People definitely need to take advantage of
Mhm.
that. Do you care to talk about how important that is?
Incredibly. The best way to network as an undergrad, in my personal opinion, is building a good rapport with your professors. There's a professor that I'm taking some classes with right now who I haven't taken since my sophomore year.
Mhm.
And the reason that I wanted to take that class is because I really like her teaching style. Her name's Dr. Hanrahan. Dr. Hanrahan, if you're listening to this, you're awesome. God, I love that woman so much. She's actually one of the reasons I got into grad school here. But, you know, networking with your professors is really good, especially if you're interested in going the research route. A lot of your professors have pet projects that they're working on,
Mhm.
some of which have funding from like various agencies and some of which don't. But I do highly recommend like being in touch with your professors. If you get the opportunity to talk to upperclassmen in your major, they're also another great resource for you.
Okay.
Two of my very good friends who graduated last year, I think, I believe both got jobs doing aerospace engineering for the Air Force, I think. And one of them actually was a transfer from the BME department to aerospace, which is really funny. But yeah, talking to upperclassmen as well as your professors is a really good way to network.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll say being in the College of Communications, I don't know if for those that are listening, if you were big into, if you kept up with UT football this year, College Game Day came to visit campus twice, once for Florida and once for the Alabama game. And the College of Communications had guest speakers from College Game Day come talk to us, and networking at like those events and those at engineering or really anything on campus is huge and definitely need to take advantage of to build those relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and it truly does make a difference. And even if you feel like you're timid or scared or intimidated by them, just go for it. They were once in your shoes, and
Mhm.
it might not have been here, but it was definitely a different situation and scenario.
Yeah, that applies to the engineering department as well. especially because so many of the engineering professors are involved in research, the best way to ingratiate yourself to a professor is to ask them about their research. And their information about engineering research is readily available on their like faculty page, which is actually how I found out that one of my professors was doing cancer bio research. And then like the following semester, I actually had her in class, and that's how I ended up working in her lab. So, Dr. Crouch, if you're listening to this, thank you for giving me a job.
Definitely some good shout outs.
Yes, for sure. So you mentioned that you're a grad student.
I'm going to be.
Oh, you're going to be a grad student.
Right now I'm in my 4th year of my undergrad.
Okay.
So, bachelor's in May.
Got it. Are you going to UT for grad
Yes.
school? Why is that?
Partially because I applied really late, and
Okay.
UT is very forgiving about deadlines for like matriculating students.
Yes.
I think that's the right word. But also partially because there's a lot of research that goes on here that I'm really interested in. Specifically, again, going back to regenerative, or tissue and regenerative medicine. Funnily enough, there isn't actually a program for regenerative medicine directly in the BME department, but BME partners with the VetMed college, and they have a couple of programs for translational research for regenerative medicine. And what that means is basically, because they're in the vet school, they do a lot of their research on animals, but with translational research, the primary goal is how can we take the information in like context of, say, horses, dogs, things like that, and how can we restructure and repurpose that information for human studies, which is actually similar to what my undergrad research is right now, is looking at the way certain cancers form and metabolize in a dog, because it's a very common cancer in humans as well.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of
Wow,
that
yeah.
correlation.
Yeah, it's I'm gonna get this wrong. If Dr. Crouch is listening to this, she's gonna be mad at me as well. I believe it is a myxosarcoma, which is a soft tissue sarcoma that is pretty common in humans, but is 6 times more likely to occur in domesticated dogs.
Wow.
And the tumor itself actually comes from her dog. So
Okay.
her dog is also fine. God, all my stories revolve around people who have cancer. But yeah, so the tumor that I'm doing research on is Dr. Crouch's dog, Mindy. And again, just sort of looking at like different components of this particular cancer, and how research into the cancer from a canine perspective can translate into a human perspective.
Yeah. I know you said all your stories have something to do with like cancer and all that, but it explains why you're passionate about it.
Yes.
And why you're going for this major and what you want to do with your life.
Yes. Up until very recently, I wanted to go into like more deep into oncology. But then I had an opportunity to shadow. I'm going to try to keep this tangent as short as possible, but there's a reason that I switched from looking into cancer and stuff and going into tissue engineering. My mom back home, she has a friend whose 2 kids, her son and daughter, both got their PhDs in, the son, I believe, got his in tissue engineering, and the daughter, I think, did some like really fancy finance stuff. So they actually started a startup out in Memphis through the University of Memphis that is now FDA approved to create a new kind of wound dressing. So for those of you who are okay with me getting a little nerdy for a second, basically, when you're treating a wound development and treatment occurs in 4 stages. And most wound dressings that you have in a clinical or in like a hospital or whatever will only target one of those 2 things. It'll either be regrowing the tissue or keeping the wound a sterile environment to prevent bacteria from growing into it.
Yes.
So my mom's friend's son, Isaac, he basically developed a kind of like a bandage that does both of those things, which is very uncommon in the world of like that sort of stuff. And I actually got to tour the facility he did a lot of his undergrad research in 2 summers ago, and that's sort of what caused me to switch gears into being more interested in tissue engineering.
That's an awesome story.
Yeah.
It is
really
very
cool.
Yeah.
And I could go into like the super nerdy stuff of it, but I don't want to bore people.
Yeah. If you could create something like that, or what's like your goal? Like, what would you do?
So, that's a good question. Primarily, I am interested in that sort of like tissue regeneration for improving the integration of prosthetics into the body.
Mhm.
I think ideally what I would like to do is be part of a team that ultimately gets to the like level of like, and this is some real sci-fi stuff, basically getting into like full, you know how there are some breeds of lizard or some species of lizard
Yes.
that if you cut off their tail can grow back.
Yeah, it's like a Spider-Man.
Yeah. So starfish have a very similar thing where if you cut off one of the like prongs on a starfish, it can
Yes.
regrow it fully.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember I believe it's the pancreas. Human pancreases have the same capacity where if you damage it enough, it can actually completely regrow the organ. So I want to
Wow.
basically get into similar stuff
Okay.
like that, which is if you have like a prosthetic limb, rather than attaching or if you have like an amputation,
Mhm.
rather than attaching, a hunk of metal and plastic and,
Yes.
you know, what if you could actually get back to like full limb regeneration?
Wow.
That's a
Which
lot.
it's
Yeah.
very
Oh my
complex,
gosh.
and
Uh-huh.
realistically, it probably won't happen in my lifetime. And if it does, I'll probably only get to work on the beginning stages of it.
But never say never. You never know.
Yeah. But you'd be looking at things like, okay, differentiating various cell lines to get like your bone marrow, the actual bone, soft tissue, hard tissue, nerves, which Stanford University a couple of years ago actually released a report that they'd actually figured out how to create brand new nerve cells in vitro, which is like in a laboratory environment. Because one of the things with nerve damage is nerve cells take an incredibly long time to grow back, which is why most nerve damage is usually permanent to semi-permanent, depending on when you get it. But basically sort of like integrating all of those things, looking at, animal genomics to see how the mechanisms work there, looking into in vitro cell growth and differentiation with like stem cells and things like that. That's sort of the, if I can somehow figure out how to do that, that would be like discovering the secrets of the universe for me.
For sure.
Mhm.
Like right up there with being able to like stare into a black hole.
So, do you have anything you would like to add for those listening that are incoming freshmen, interested in engineering, or maybe have a similar story to what you mentioned about your mom, or maybe like your mom's friend?
Yeah, I would say probably just to sort of close things out, regardless of what field of study you want to get into, there are options and there are ways to, even if you're in one field of study, it doesn't necessarily mean you're like only going to do things within that sort of field. Like, for example, again, I'm in biomedical engineering. Growing up, my favorite subjects weren't actually science, but history. And so as part of the gen ed requirements, you do have to take like classes that are outside of your specific field of interest. So if you do end up having if you end up being involved in like nursing or something like physics or engineering or anything like that, you're not going to be only doing things within the hard sciences. You'll also get an opportunity to do things with the social sciences as well, which can also be, if you start early enough, can also be a really good way to get into like minors. Although with engineering, usually they recommend minoring within your department. So biomedical engineering is sort of overall housed within a sub-department for mechanical, aerospace, and biomedical. So for me, if I wanted to do a minor, it would probably be in mechanical or aerospace. But there are ways, if you're really willing to do it, minoring outside of your program or even double majoring. And that's a really good way to stay in touch with some of your passions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ziven, for coming on. We're so glad you were able to come on.
Thank you.
and
It's a pleasure to be
give
here.
us a little bit about your life story.
Awesome.
Yes, thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you very much.